Hey class. So today we're going to be talking about one of our more controversial issues, the issue of abortion. So what we're not going to do is call any names or talk about political positions or anything like that. We're going to talk about this from a philosophical perspective. We'll look at the different ethical theories and what they have to say both for and against abortion. And at the end of the day, we can ask ourselves what answers the most questions and has the least amount of problems. And so hopefully we'll be able to understand our own positions better and those that may oppose us, and understand what motivates them to hold to those positions. So first, what we'll do is look at a few statistics. So half of all pregnancies are unplanned, and half of those generally end up in abortion. And since the legalization of abortion in all 50 states, there's been about 50 to 60 million abortions. So it's about 50 years and 50 million abortions. Those generally occur within the first 90, or the first 90% occur in the first trimester. And some other related issues to this might be poverty or lack of access to other things. Not sure. Black and Hispanic women are also more likely to have abortions. So Roe v. Wade, this is the case from the Supreme Court that decided that it will be legal in all 50 states. And I know that's coming up again. It's beyond the scope of this so far. So the first trimester, the woman has complete autonomy, is what they decided. Second trimester, the state has a legitimate interest in regulation. So even under the Roe v. Wade laws, the state can regulate this. In the third trimester, the state has an issue in protecting the life of the fetus. So very few states will you see any late-term abortions available. I think there are a couple that do allow for very late-term abortions, but I'm not sure if those require specific circumstances or not. So here's some things about the fetus. So there's DNA present at conception. So you got the egg and you've got the sperm, and when those two fuse, boop, I don't know if that's the sound it makes, but it makes a new set of DNA that is distinct from both the mother and the father. So you have this new DNA that's present. The embryo attaches to the uterine wall by 10 days, and this is what's considered pregnancy. That only happens to anywhere from about 25 to 50% of these embryos. So not every embryo that is or egg that is fertilized actually attaches to the uterine wall. So 23 days, you get a heartbeat. Nervous system starts developing brain waves at 6 weeks, and they start to begin to look like a human being at about 8 weeks. And they can experience pain and survive outside of the womb by at least 24 weeks. And there's different literature on that. So those numbers might not be exactly accurate in today's research. So we've got 3 stages. Here's some fancy words for us. We've got zygote, that's conception, embryo until about 10 weeks, and then after 10 weeks, it's called a fetus. So most people just end up calling it fetus, baby, whatever, depending on your positions. So I'm probably just going to say fetus throughout the rest of this. So some more terminology here for you. This is really politically charged, but everybody knows what it means, so I'm just going to use it. Pro-life, those are generally the people who are anti-abortion. So they're concerned with the supposed rights of the fetus, and that's really what this question is about. And pro-choice is focusing on the rights of the woman. So yes, I know those pro-life and pro-choice are rather controversial, but we all know what they mean, so we'll just go with those instead of trying to explain new terminology. So this is really where the crux of the issue is does this fetus have rights, and if they do they supervene on the rights of the woman? So we can ask those questions as we go on. So one of the questions we might ask then about the supposed rights of this fetus is it a person? So what are the necessary and sufficient conditions of personhood? You're probably wondering, why is Yoda on the screen? Well, Yoda is non-human, but he's a person, at least in the Star Wars universe, right? He has all these same features that the other persons, other minds have. So could we say the same thing about a fetus, that a fetus has at least something that makes it a person? So we've got the question of what's necessary for personhood and what is sufficient conditions for personhood. So necessary conditions and sufficient conditions, these are some different terms that you might need to know. So necessary is something that must be present. So like water is necessary for life in the way that we know it for it to exist. So water is necessary for life. Now a sufficient condition, that is something that guarantees it. So it's a condition that would guarantee personhood. We don't know what that would be. Maybe being able to articulate yourself in a human language or something like that, and think. I don't know. The example I have is cheesecake. If I ate nothing but cheesecake, I would probably get fat. I would be overweight and not be healthy. That would be a sufficient condition for making me overweight. But it's not a necessary condition. I could also eat nothing but Bojangles, or eat apple pies or milkshakes or something else, and that would also make me overweight. But a sufficient condition of eating a nothing but cheesecake diet would make me overweight. So yeah, it's not a necessary condition, but it's a sufficient condition. I think your book says something about being a senator would be a sufficient condition, something that guarantees your personhood, because only humans generally run for the Senate. So yeah, necessary and sufficient. So here's some of our proposed necessary and sufficient conditions. So we've got conceived by humans, and some people say this equivocates or begs the question that there are the DNA argument says that there's a new genetic structure that is distinctly human. So then it's a human being. It's separate from both mom and dad, and so that might be a necessary or a sufficient condition for its personhood. There's the physical resemblance argument. So after about 8 weeks or so, if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, then it's a fetus. St. Thomas Aquinas, a great medieval scholastic philosopher, has the soul criterion. Now, this is probably only going to convince a few people, probably people of faith, that there's a soul present at some point within the pregnancy, and so to be on the safe side, you treat it as a human being. The viability criterion, so can it survive outside of the womb? That is a rather controversial one for a few different reasons. One, some newborns with certain conditions have trouble surviving outside of the womb, but we would consider them to be persons. And with our medical technology, the younger, they can be younger and younger now that can still survive outside of the womb. So those are all different proposed things. One of the strongest, I think, is probably the future value like ours. That given to some kind of natural development, whether or not the fetus is a person, if left to the natural course, it will eventually be someone just like us who has the same kind of intrinsic value as a person and the same hopes and wishes and dreams, et cetera, et cetera. So, and we don't have a really strict point where it's like, okay, not a person, not a person, not a person, boop, okay, now this thing's a person. So you can take it either as a, the best, as giving it some kind of, benefit of the doubt. And this is now stuck. There it goes. All right. So personhood, what is personhood? Ill-defined terms all over the place with this issue that are pretty controversial. So we've got reason, concept of self, use of language. That might be too high, setting the bar too high for people with severe mental retardation or something like that. Family resemblances, these are typical, but not necessary for personhood. If someone has a child with Down syndrome, they don't really resemble the rest of the family. But you would still say that they still resemble a human being in some way. And that no one would deny them their humanity. So those might not be the best criteria for personhood. So we're still left without some kind of very specific thing that's not really controversial. So how about some defenses for abortion? So here's one, the famous violinist. You've probably heard this one. If not, here we go. So you wake up, you go to sleep tonight. Maybe you fell asleep watching this video, and you wake up and you're in the hospital, and you've been attached at the side to a famous violinist. He's one of the greatest in the world, greatest who's ever lived. And so the doctors and the violin society or whoever said, well, you were the perfect match for this person, and we didn't have time to ask you, and you maybe say no because he was dying, but he has this fatal kidney disease, and so he just needs to use your kidneys until we can get him to up to spec, and he'll live. But it's just 9 months. Just 9 months you'll be attached to him. So yeah, you just got to stay here, and you're probably going to have some back pain, blah blah blah. You're attached to another human being. So if you were in that position where you've been attached against your will to this other human being, whether they're a violinist or not, and of great worth to society, do you have the right to sever that connection? Like, do you have that sovereignty over your body? So the people who use this argument are saying, well, yes, you do. You have that. So it's focusing on the rights of the person, or the rights of the mother with a pregnancy, rather than any kind of supposed rights of the fetus. Another version of the argument is that we have ownership over our bodies, and that we can do what we want with our bodies. And so a woman has ownership of her own body, and so no one can use it without her permission. And the objection that generally goes with this one is that we don't really use ownership for our bodies in any other way than, in this case, with abortion or pregnancy. So, could we say that a fetus is, an intruder, like someone breaking and entering your home? Is there, a one-to-one correspondence there, enough applicability for that? I don't know. That's a debatable issue. So we can't do whatever we want with our bodies in other situations. Is another of the retorts. You can't sell your organs on eBay. You can't amputate your arm because you don't like your arm anymore, or something like that. So there's certain restrictions that you have for your body in other instances. And so is this a special case, or is it special pleading saying this case doesn't apply to this, but actually it does? So there's different arguments on that right there. Another question with this argument is equal protection under the law. And so women, they are the ones who get pregnant and have the babies hanging on their fronts for 9 months or so, and it's terribly uncomfortable and changes your body in many ways, and will have lasting impacts on the body. So Ruth Bader Ginsburg stated in one of her opinions, in an abortion case that had come up before her, that women bear a disproportionate burden from pregnancy, one that men do not. I have 3 children. My wife birthed them all, so I still feel the same. I look the same, and my wife has gone through 3 pregnancies, and so it's changed her body in certain ways. There's the physical, the mental, and often the financial, that it is easier for men to walk away from something like this than it is for women, both legally and physically. So there's the objection to this that, well, there's more at stake than just discrimination. There's human life at stake. So again, this goes back to that question of whether or not a fetus is a person or not. So natural law is one of the theories that we're going to talk about in this class. This was developed by Thomas Aquinas and Aristotle before him. This has a teleological view of the world. There's a fancy word that you can use to impress your friends and intimidate your enemies. So this basically means that there is this purpose to life. Everything is designed in some way. It's providential. So Thomas Aquinas was a Dominican, a doctor of the church and saint. So, he's certainly got his viewpoints on this. So we are made by God for some specific purpose for him. And the whole world is imbued with this kind of design. So this morality that we have, just by virtue of us being human beings, we don't have to be Christians or believe in God or anything. We can just apprehend it through reason, according to Aquinas. And so he thinks that that's just the way things are. He's also got this really interesting principle in there called the principle of double effect. And some have pointed to this and say that even if a fetus was a person, that there are certain circumstances where it would be permissible, at least, for an abortion to take place. And so he's got these 4 conditions. So the action must be good or neutral. The consequences are not intended, or the bad consequences are not intended. The good consequences cannot be the direct causal result of the bad consequences. And the good consequences must be proportionate to the bad. They need to outweigh those bad consequences. So one of the examples that's often used is the drawbridge example. So you're operating a drawbridge, and there's a train that's radioed in that says, hey, lower the bridge, our brakes are out. There's 100 people on the train. And so you have to lower the bridge to save these 100 people. But you look and you see there's a kid who's under the bridge, and he's not going to be able to get out on time if you lower the bridge. So you can either let this one kid die or let 100 people on the train die. And so people have said with this argument that you could lower the bridge, thus killing that kid, but saving 100 lives because the proportion is there. You're saving 100 people to one person. And also, you're not meaning to kill the kid, and it's not the direct causal result of your actions or of your intentions. So what you're doing is you're trying to save 100 lives. You're not trying to kill one life with that. Another example would be uterine cancer, which would be very pertinent to our conversation here. So you've got a woman who has uterine cancer, and if she doesn't get her uterus out, she could die of that cancer. And if she were pregnant, then that's obviously going to kill the fetus. So the intention of the surgery is not to kill the fetus. The intention of the surgery is to save the woman's life. And the same thing for like an ectopic pregnancy or something like that. So basically what Aquinas would say is you need these 4 conditions, and you need to have the right intentions with that. And so there's a lot of play with that. So most abortions are for economic reasons or for social reasons. So someone's either not ready for pregnancy or thinks it's going to unduly affect their career or their life or something like that. So you could ask, are the intentions under this sufficient for making it permissible? And again, all these are quite debatable topics. So some more additional questions for us. Who can make the decisions? Does the father have any say in the matter, or is it simply up to the woman? Does she need to even notify the father? Parental consent for minors, that has been floated in some states. I don't know. This isn't really a legal lecture here. We're trying to just get into the meat of the philosophical, the ethical issue of it. But these are valid questions here. Should taxes be used to fund abortions? If there's a significant portion of people who disagree with that, so that's a good question. There's fetal homicide laws where if you are in a car wreck and you kill a woman and she's pregnant, you can be charged with double homicide and negligent homicide for killing 2 people, whereas that woman could have been on her way to the abortion clinic to abort the fetus, and that's perfectly legal. So we have some inconsistency in our laws there. Birth defects, child abuse from drugs and alcohol. You can be charged with criminal activity for any of these things. And this can occur before any kind of viability of the fetus. Can we also abort based on gender? China and India are both facing a shortage of girls for this very reason. China has over 10 million men who will never find a wife or girlfriend because there's just not enough ladies around in China for that because of sex selective abortions. Very interesting questions that are related to this issue. So at the end of the day, you're going to have to ask yourself about these questions. What makes abortion permissible, if anything? Are the rights of the woman superior to those of the fetus if the fetus has rights? What is the criteria for personhood? So there's lots of different questions to ask with this. But there is some common ground. Both pro-life and pro-choice, neither one really want abortion. They want to reduce unwanted pregnancies. They want other kinds of contraception and things like that. So pro-choice people generally aren't saying, yay, abortion. They're saying that is an unfortunate but permissible way to get rid of an unwanted pregnancy. So mostly they're saying advocating for education and things like that and better access to contraceptives. So reducing unwanted pregnancies, making informed choices. And one of my favorite things that I think we can really narrow down on a lot of our philosophical and ethical problems is don't be a jerk. Just don't be a jerk. And really think about the motivations of the other people and try to understand both your own position and the position of those who may oppose you, and try to see what those motivations are and perhaps the validity behind them. So be generous in your interpretations with these.